may be seated. I want to welcome all of you to worship this morning. As you can tell, we've got some other people leading today. In fact, Jeff, would you just sort of stand out here? Because you were hiding behind the drums over there. Jeff is a friend of Ted's. We needed a drummer, and he recruited him. And so I want to welcome, he's a great drummer, by the way. Let's thank God for his gifts of music among us. I like his hairstyle, too. I would try that, except I don't have enough hair where he has his. So it would look kind of dorky. So enjoy it while you can, Jeff, because it may happen that will spread out later and become a little more like the Red Sea when Moses went through. Because that's what I've got. And so we, again, want to welcome all of you to worship. Take from the worship folder, if you would, the blue ministry information sheet. Sign that and let us know you've been here for worship, whether you're a guest or regular attender. On the back side of the sheet, one of the most important places for you is an empty space where you can leave prayer requests for our prayer ministry team. They would be pleased to take those prayers before God for the next 7 days. Prayers of thanksgiving, prayers of special need, and we just are privileged to be prayer advocates, prayer warriors with you. This morning, by the way, when you're done with that form, hold on to it. You can put it in the offering a little bit later on in the service. We're in the series, as Pastor Eric mentioned, a series that is about stained glass windows. And I thought I'd never preach about stained glass. And we had someone who, a few months ago, I was talking to Pastor Eric and said, do you guys ever explain the stained glass windows? Well, I've been here for almost 20 years, and no. So I can say we have not done that. But if you look at the stained glass, and especially on a day like today when you got the sun shining so beautifully, but you have to turn around and see most of it because it's behind you. And again, what I learned from the architect was back in the 1950s, people used to walk out of church in a very sedate and orderly fashion. Because in 1 Corinthians 14 it says all things should be done decently and in good order. And so what that meant is you filed out and you quietly walked out, you recessed, you looked at the stained glass. That's the last image that you have before you walk out of church after having been here for word and sacrament. Okay, so that was in the 1950s. In the 21st century, we don't do it that way anymore. We want you to stand up and talk, and you probably miss the windows because you're enjoying the sense of community with one another, which is a value in the Christian church, that we enjoy a sense of community. And so you may not see those windows or ponder them as much or stand there and look at the verses at the bottom and so on. So we're going to tease those things out, and this may take us until Christmas. I don't know. Well, as long as we're going, Pastor Eric, we've been on Christmas already. This is the third week or so, and we're not done. So it's just with that bottom window. It's going to take us a while to meander through all this. We're going to let the stained glass in the front be kind of the outline, the big guide, because it's the redemption history from the birth of Jesus to his ascension, and all the pieces in between are what we're going to be talking about, okay? Why that stuff is so important to us. So this morning we're still in the Christmas story, as Pastor Eric suggested. And we're going to be looking particularly at the three crowns. So if you go above the cross on the altar and go above Jesus and Mary and Joseph, and then there's a star there. We could also talk about that, I suppose. And then there is the image of the three crowns. And the three crowns signify the coming of the Magi, because in the 1950s we still believe that there were "We three kings of Orient are." Remember that one? Some of you remember that song at Christmas time. Well, first of all, we don't think they were kings, and secondly, there weren't three. There may have been 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or however many. There may have been an entourage. We don't know the number, and we're going to look at that in just a moment in the text. We're going to be studying this morning Matthew chapter 2, the first 12 verses. And we're going to do that under the theme, whatever it takes to come to Jesus. And as we do that, I'd like to just ponder with you these words from Matthew chapter 12. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men, or the Greek word is actually magi, from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them, quite diligently in fact, of where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it was written by the prophet Micah," and this is a rough paraphrase of Micah anyway, that's quoted here. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. And from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared, because he wanted to know how old the kid was. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently, and again there's that word, search diligently, accurately, for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. Ha ha. The ha ha wasn't there, but it was. It was in Herod, and we'll get to that. And after listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen, when it rose, went before them, until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Okay, they had how many gifts did they have? Okay, how many of you think there were 3 gifts? How many of you think that that's not necessarily correct? I'm with you. Okay, there are 3 kinds of gifts, hence the people have said there are what? 3 gifts. And there were how many people? Well, there were 3 people, of course, each bearing 1 gift. Now, if you read the text, it doesn't really say that at all. In fact, it says they opened their treasures, plural, and there were gifts of gold and of frankincense and of myrrh. So there probably were multiple gifts. Okay, so that what you get is well-meaning Christians have made up some stuff, and maybe some artists got into it, and and gave us this idea. So we 3 kings know, 3 know of Orient. That probably is true. Where did these guys come from? Well, likely they came from around Persia. Now, let's see. How far is it from here to San Diego? Anybody know? About 700 miles? Okay. Let's say, and see, how far is it from here to Eureka? Around 200-ish. Okay, so here's the deal. These guys traveled from Eureka to San Diego. Okay? They did not have an air-conditioned Acura with XM satellite. Okay? Promise you, they did not have that. What they may have had camels. Now, if you are about 1,000 miles from Jerusalem, the capital city of Israel, it's going to take you a while, whether you're on foot or on camel, it's going to take you a while to get from point A, which is maybe, if you just imagine Baghdad, roughly, and then Jerusalem. And so if you've got that kind of a picture in mind, or think of Eureka to San Diego, basically the entire California coastline, and you're going to make this trip. That would take a fair amount of planning, preparation, and resources. They did not have embassy suites along the way. They didn't have Google Maps, but they knew that there was a trade route from east to west. And the one claim to fame that Israel had at that time was, it was on the seacoast of the Mediterranean. It was at the end of the trade route. And so people would go through Israel. They wouldn't go to Israel. Does that make sense? It was not a destination. I mean, there are a lot of places between here and San Diego that are not destinations for me. Okay? You probably have a few like that too. Okay? I stop at Harris Ranch, but I don't make that I don't travel to Harris Ranch. Okay? They have nice restrooms. Now, The idea being these people would have planned out a several-month journey, at least 2 months, to make this trip. It would take a certain amount of courage to make this trip, carrying the kind of treasures that they had, particularly the gifts that were of gold, of the nature of gold. Because along the trade route, they had people who were scammers. Call them bandits. They would camp out, they'd be along the line, and they would rob people along the trade routes, because that was the only way to get from, say, Persia to the Mediterranean sea coast, where you could board ship and go to other places around the Mediterranean. Are you with me? What I'm trying to hold out to you is these guys came from the east, and they went to Jerusalem, and that was a destination. They weren't going, that wasn't just a stop off, that was where they were headed. Because they came to Jerusalem, because if there is a man who's going to be born king of the Jews, where do you expect to find him? Well, in Jerusalem, it's the capital city. And so they go to Jerusalem, and there they find Herod, who was the king. Because most likely the king is going to be a son of Herod. Herod the Great, who happened to have had many sons and way many more daughters. I mean, he was your classic stud. Okay? He had multiple wives. And by the way, it says when Herod was disturbed, all of Jerusalem was disturbed with him. You have to understand this about Herod. He was called Herod the Great, but he was more like Terror the Great. It was said of Herod that it was safer to be Herod's sow than his son. Okay? By the way, there's one letter difference between son and sow in Greek. Interesting little, I don't know if that means anything, but interesting little tidbit. But it was safer to be the sow, because the sow wouldn't get killed by a Jew, right? Wouldn't be kosher. He killed his sons because he thought his sons were going to rebel against him. He took out his wife, he took out one of his wives, took out her mother, I think it was, so it'd be his mother-in-law or father-in-law. Apparently he took out several different people in his own family because they were a threat to him. They were a threat to his kingdom. So can you imagine if this little kid is born and is going to be king and he's not his son, that he might be just a wee bit unhappy about that? Because here's going to be, and it anticipates an overthrow of himself and his government. So when he is disturbed, because of his reputation, all of Jerusalem is disturbed. Everybody is anxious. The Magi are undaunted by all of this stuff. They come at a great distance, from a great distance. They come with precious gifts. They meet Herod. By the way, have you stopped to ask the question yet? Why would they come that far? Have you asked the question yet? Why would these Persians do this? I mean, they're used to big kingdoms. They're used to powerful kings. Who cares about Israel? Have you wondered how they knew about the King of the Jews yet? If you haven't wondered about that yet, I hope you are wondering right now. Okay? I can find only one reason in my mind to explain why they would do that. Why would they risk everything? Why would they do whatever it would take to come to worship this baby? Worship this baby. Worship this baby means they're going to give to the baby what you give to God, as well as a king, GB. Yes. Why would they do that? They were not Jewish. They were Gentiles. They had many different gods. Why would they come and worship? I would have a sneaking suspicion it might go like this. Do you remember in the Bible about 586 BC, the Israelites were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar into the land of Babylon. And while they are there, a guy by the name of Daniel, has some prophecy. They may have heard the prophet, some other prophets as well speak. And for these 500 years, it appears that message, that story about Israel and its coming Messiah continued to percolate through the culture. And I'm going to add one more caveat. I'm thinking that the only explanation that makes sense to me is this is a God thing. That God somehow was working through that message that had been promoted from the days of Daniel for 500, almost 600 years, working through that message, prepared the hearts, and somehow these magi, by divine inspiration, were led to come all this way and worship this newborn king. And it was so significant to them, they would do whatever it took to get there. How many of you had other things you could have been doing this morning? How many have things on your to-do list that you could have been doing something else, and it would have been good to get those things checked off too? Okay. You are a wee bit like those magi. You have chosen to come and take time to be with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. When we take time to be with God, to hear Him in His Word, to worship Him in His house, we are doing what the Magi did. And I would propose we could learn from them to do whatever it takes, because it's so mission critical that for our own life, that we take the time to be with God. Now, I don't know about you, but I can easily get distracted. I can hear the little chime on my email. I can hear the little beep on my cell phone that there's a text message. And I can get distracted by those kinds of things. Anybody in the room like that? Oh, good. I sometimes worry that I'm the only one on the planet who has these crazy things that go on in my head. But it's so easy to be distracted and to go down this rabbit trail and then down another rabbit trail, and after that, another rabbit trail, and forget where I started. Okay. These people had a single-minded focus that for 2 solid months, they took step by step by step through the risk factors that they would encounter on the normal trade routes, and they go into Jerusalem to find Him who was born King of the Jews. They're not even a part of His culture. And what's ironic is those who were a part of His culture rejected Him. These strangers, these foreigners came from outside to worship Him. And I'm thinking, God, you must have put that text in the Bible for a reason. You must be telling that story because it's important to you that we know that whatever it takes is what you want from us to put you in the center of our lives. Because you, God, have put us in the center of your life. He has put us in the crosshairs, if you will, taking aim at us through the cross of Jesus Christ. And He's put such value on us. He said, you're so important to me that I want you to spend an eternity with me. And I want that eternity to be practiced already now. That we are going to be together. And I want you to be at a place of worship where you come and honor me, not because I, God, need my ego boosted, but because you and I need to be connected. Because I love you and I want the best for you. See, that I think is in this story. It's so easy to read through the story and miss how important it is that we, like the Magi, do whatever it takes, as you've done this morning, to be here in worship. Because here in worship, we are fed in His Word. Here in worship, we are fed in His sacrament. And here in worship, we find strength in coming together to worship our God. I've heard people again and again say, I can worship God out in nature just fine. And that's kind of true, you can. But let me ask you, do you? Or do you get distracted by the nature and miss the one who created it? I love the redwood trees when we go cycling over to the coast, whether it be up Old La Honda or up Kings Mountain. I love redwood trees. We've got a couple in our yard. I love redwood trees. I have never heard a redwood tree say, "You're forgiven." I've never heard a redwood tree say, "I love you." I've never heard a redwood tree say, "I'll die for you." So I can miss the important messages of nature, which reflects something of the nature of God. I can miss that. But when we gather in a place like this, as people of God, as we gather around word and sacrament, I find that strengthens my faith. I find it valuable to sit and listen to Pastor Eric preach. Because I learn, and he puts it in ways that make sense to me. And I need to hear that. I need to learn as I talk to you. I learn from God as I prepare a message for you. And I suspect that we can learn from each other. That when we gather in worship, there's something stronger than when we do it alone. It helps us be focused. And I want to encourage you to continue to do whatever it takes, to take whatever risks you need to take, to adjust your priorities so that you have time to be with God in worship, in prayer, in study of His Word, and to be doing that in the context of community. Because there's something really good about doing it together. Pastor Eric told us earlier in one of this, as we were going to prepare to sing O Holy Night, about the power of having a bunch of pastors sing. And I've had that same experience, and Pastor Eric, I'm glad you reminded me of that, because it's something that's really kind of powerful when we do it together. There's something powerful when we gather as a community of faith here that strengthens me just as we do it together and helps in our focus on this one God who would sacrifice himself for us. Folks, I want to encourage you to continue to do what it takes to come and fall before the feet of Jesus at the foot of his cross, at his empty tomb, to worship him and adore him, and continue to bring to him the gifts of your love, of your heart, of your life, so that you too might be blessed and make a difference for time and for eternity. Those magi, by the grace of God, have made a difference in our lives. Their story is told again today. May you find that you make a difference because God makes a difference in you. Amen.